Where the hemispheres meet the diencephalon lies a complex ring of structures called the limbic system. In evolutionary terms, it's one of the most ancient parts of the brain. Now covered by the enormous expansion of cerebral cortex, it's concerned with short-term memory,
19,000.
the emotions, especially fear, anger and aggression, and the homeostatic responses we call instincts, sexual behavior and the rearing of young, for example. The limbic system has a number of parts: the olfactory pathway and the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the piriform lobe, the hippocampus, the septal areas, the cingulate and parahippocampal gyri, the indusium griseum and the hypothalamus, linked by the anterior commissure, the fornix, and the striae terminalis and habennularis. The olfactory pathway has only 2 neurons. It begins in the nose. Its mucous lining contains olfactory receptors from whose peripheral processes project a number of odor-sensitive short hairs, the olfactory cilia. Impulses generated here enter the fine central processes of the olfactory cells, which form the first cranial nerves, the olfactory nerves. In contrast to all other sensory pathways, olfactory impulses reach the cerebral cortex without relaying in the thalamus. After passing through openings in the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone, the olfactory nerves enter the olfactory bulbs, which lie beneath the frontal lobes. Within them, in discrete territories called synaptic glomeruli, the olfactory nerve fibers synapse with mitral and tufted cells. Their axons, together with fibers from the opposite side, leave the olfactory bulb as the olfactory tract. As it reaches the anterior perforated substance, the tract divides into medial and lateral olfactory striae. Some fibers of the medial stria pass to the olfactory bulb of the opposite side in the anterior commissure. The lateral stria passes to the periamygdaloid and prepiriform cortex, together called the primary olfactory cortex. Behind the primary olfactory cortex, the entorhinal area of the parahippocampal gyrus forms the secondary olfactory cortex. It is here, in these 3 areas, prepiriform, periamygdaloid and entorhinal, which comprise the piriform lobe, that the appreciation of smell occurs. Through its connections to many other areas, odors influence the emotions and the autonomic system. The amygdala, so named because it resembles an almond in shape, is in the temporal lobe. It receives olfactory impulses direct from the olfactory bulb and indirectly from the piriform cortex. Efferents pass via the stria terminalis to the septal areas and the hypothalamus. Some continue in the stria medullaris to reach the habennular nucleus. The septal areas are important focal zones through which many of the principal limbic and hypothalamic structures are interconnected. The septal nuclei lie in the paraterminal gyrus. The septum pellucidum, a thin bilateral sheet of grey and white matter enclosing a narrow cavity, separates the lateral ventricles. The hippocampus is a curved ridge of grey matter in the floor of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. Its anterior end is expanded, and its surface grooved to give a paw-like appearance, the pes hippocampi. Its name derives from its supposed resemblance in cross-section to a seahorse. It consists of the complex interfolded layers of the dentate gyrus and cornu aminis. Their 3-layered cortex is part of the archipallium, or primitive cortex. It is continuous below with the subiculum, which has 4, 5, then 6 layers as it merges with the neocortex of the parahippocampal gyrus. The ventricular surface of the hippocampus is covered by ependyma, beneath which efferent fibers form the alveus, a sheet of white matter which converges on a fiber bundle called the fimbria of the fornix. The fornix is the sole efferent system of the hippocampus. Most of its fibers pass in front and below the splenium, then curve forward above the thalamus, forming the crus of the fornix. The 2 crura meet to form the body of the fornix, which lies in the roof of the third ventricle, suspended from the corpus callosum by the septum pellucidum. Anteriorly, the body divides into right and left columns, which split around the anterior commissure to reach the mammillary bodies. Covering the corpus callosum is a thin sheet of grey matter called the indusium griseum. On each side are embedded two narrow bundles of white fibers, the medial and lateral longitudinal striae of Lancisi. They pass forwards to the paraterminal gyri and backwards through the gyrus fasciolaris to reach the fimbriae of the fornix.